What would you do if the entire world laughed at your dream? If your family called you delusional, your friends disappeared, and society branded you a fool? Would you fold, or would you double down? London's sky was dark that afternoon, darker than usual, as if it conspired to mirror the storm swelling inside him. Rain clung to the edges of his threadbare coat, soaking through the wool like defeat seeping into bones. Nathaniel Cole stood outside the cold glass doors of a bank he no longer had access to. His account had been frozen. Again, insufficient funds. The ATM blinked at him in mockery. He didn't blink back, just stood there, drenched and silent, his jaw clenched so tightly he could feel the pressure in his molars. In his right hand, he clutched a folded eviction notice, creased, crumpled, but real. London didn't wait for broke dreamers. Just 29, but the weight on Nathaniel's shoulders made him look older. Life had weathered him early. No wealthy lineage, no inheritance, no fallback plan. Just a brilliant mind, a laptop that barely turned on, and a gut feeling that something massive, something digital, was going to change everything. But back then, no one wanted to hear about Bitcoin. Not from him. Not from a black man who came from Tottenham Council Estates, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs and prayed with worn-out rosary beads. The world had no patience for his kind of dreamer, especially not one who spoke of decentralized wealth and blockchain revolutions with fire in his eyes and holes in his shoes. He remembered the exact moment it all began to collapse. 2 years earlier, he had sold everything he owned, his watch, his car, even his late father's vintage record collection, to buy into Bitcoin. Not just a little, everything. When it dipped, they laughed. When it crashed, they called him insane. His former boss at the fintech firm dismissed him with a smirk. Vision without capital is just delusion, Nathan. His best friend, Tarek, ghosted him after borrowing £2,000 and never paying it back. "Don't worry, bro. I'll flip it in crypto, too," he'd said. Never happened. Even his own mother begged him to quit. "Nate, you're chasing shadows, baby. Come back home. Take the teaching job. Start over." But Nathaniel couldn't. Wouldn't. There was a fire in him he couldn't put out, even if it burned him alive. He'd seen it. A new financial order, raw and untamed, waiting for someone who dared to believe before the world caught up. But belief doesn't pay rent. Not in London. By late 2020, he was living out of a squat in Southwark. Bare walls, busted floorboards, Wi-Fi stolen from the corner shop downstairs. He rationed instant noodles, lived off black coffee and adrenaline, and coded through nights that bled into dawn. In those quiet, desperate hours, he wasn't just betting on Bitcoin. He was studying every aspect of the crypto ecosystem, blockchain tech, smart contracts, decentralized finance, DeFi. He wrote white papers no one read, launched tokens no one invested in, and tried building a DeFi app on a $200 Chromebook. Every time it failed, he started again. It was obsession. Madness, maybe, but necessary. And then came the betrayal. It was January 2021 when he thought his luck had turned. A small investor group from Berlin had shown interest in his decentralized wallet protocol. They called themselves Lumen Capital. And after a few Zoom calls and due diligence, they offered him a $75,000 seed round. The money hit his account. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. He upgraded his equipment, got a decent room to work from, and began development full-time. But 6 weeks later, the rug was pulled. The funds vanished, frozen due to irregular activity, the bank claimed. Lumen Capital disappeared. Their website was gone, emails bounced, and their registered address in Berlin turned out to be a bakery. He'd been scammed, played. The humiliation almost broke him. It wasn't just the money. It was the trust, the validation he thought he'd finally earned. Gone. He considered quitting. Hell, he considered worse. The weight of the world bore down like an avalanche. His mother stopped calling, said she couldn't watch him self-destruct. But as fate would have it, that rock-bottom, harsh, unforgiving, and isolating wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Late one night, he found himself on a Discord server run by fringe crypto-anarchists, a rogue community of miners, coders, and misfits who didn't care about pedigree or polish. They cared about code. and vision and fire. They saw Nathaniel's prototype wallet. Not perfect, but pure. His ideas were years ahead of the curve. Smart contract automation for the unbanked, AI-managed micro-wallets for kids in developing countries, security features light years ahead of mainstream platforms. A rogue miner named M0RPHCUS DM'd him one night. You're onto something, but you need protection and power. Come build it with us. Not for money, for legacy. The world still thought Nathaniel was a ghost, a failed prodigy, a lunatic. But underground, something was growing. An idea, a movement, and Nathaniel was at the heart of it. By the time Bitcoin hit $40,000, he'd already created his own off-chain DeFi platform called Pillar. No marketing, no VC funding, just underground whispers and raw code. He let it grow organically, and it did, fast. By spring 2022, Pillar was handling more transactions than some regulated UK banks. Silent, anonymous, efficient. Nathaniel's anonymous handle, Billionaire, began trending in dark web circles. Then, in broader crypto forums. The same fintech firm that fired him now had their interns studying his GitHub commits. The world had no idea who Billionaire was. They didn't know he was living in a flat above a chicken shop in Brixton, still eating noodles, still burning for more. But the tipping point was coming, and when it came, it wouldn't be gradual. It would be seismic, because Nathaniel had just received a message, a private invitation, from one of the most powerful tech investment firms in Europe, the kind of people who moved silently, bought governments, and rewrote economies. They wanted to meet the ghost. They wanted to invest in Pillar. And they didn't care how crazy he used to sound. They only cared about results. And now he had them. But there was just one problem. Nathaniel had vanished. No one had seen or heard from him in months. His social accounts were gone. His flat in Brixton, empty. His crypto wallet, moved. Wiped clean. Just one final post remained on his GitHub. I told you, they'd call me crazy. Until they couldn't afford to. Rain had always meant something different to Nathaniel. In childhood, it was a sound of safety, the rhythm on the tin roof of his mother's council flat that helped him fall asleep. In youth, it became a kind of omen, drenching the concrete jungle of Tottenham, hiding the tears of boys who weren't allowed cry. Now, it washed over the windows of a blacked-out Range Rover slowly navigating through Mayfair, silent, imposing, untouchable. Inside, the man once called crazy sat in tailored obsidian wool, staring blankly through the glass. Nathaniel Cole, formerly homeless, formerly invisible, was now a myth in motion. But he hadn't come back to London to be celebrated. He had come back to settle something. 3 months earlier, the Caribbean sun had kissed his skin, but Nathaniel wasn't there for pleasure. Hidden away in a St. Kitts villa, he had become a digital phantom, working 16-hour days to finalize the blockchain infrastructure for Pillar. It was lean, elegant, everything legacy finance wasn't. But just as his product neared launch, a message shattered his calm. It was from his bank, the one he hadn't touched since his original seed fund was stolen. They had finally responded to the inquiry he'd submitted over a year ago, the one about the $75,000 wire from Lumen Capital, the one they froze without warning. Only this time, they had an answer. The account you referenced was flagged due to a directive issued by the UK's Financial Conduct Authority, in cooperation with internal compliance alerts relating to your personal risk profile. He stared at the screen. Risk profile? He had been flagged. Not the fraudsters. Not the fake VC firm. Him. The letter was cloaked in legal jargon, but one part was crystal clear. The FCA had blacklisted him from accessing banking services, silently, without trial, without evidence, on suspicion of high-risk crypto activity and money laundering concerns. His name had been poisoned, not just in the UK, globally. Banks, payment processors, even platforms like Stripe and PayPal had blacklisted him without explanation. They weren't required to give one. It was called de-risking, a quiet financial execution. They killed his access to the world's economy. And they'd done it when he was most vulnerable. Nathaniel's return to London was not triumphant. It was surgical. He moved like a ghost, operated under aliases. The shell companies, offshore structures, and zero-knowledge protocols he had built over years of self-imposed exile became his armor. He moved billions in and out of Pillar through pipelines no regulator could touch. He didn't need banks anymore. He had become one. Still, ghosts carry memories. He walked past the Brixton chicken shop, where he used to live above. Boarded up now. The corner shop whose Wi-Fi he used to steal was now a vape store. Time had moved on, but Nathaniel remembered every inch of that street. And he remembered every face that betrayed him. Tariq, his childhood best friend, who not only ghosted him during his darkest hours, but, Nathaniel would later learn, had sold one of his prototypes to a rival defied startup for £10,000 and a Tesla Model 3. He remembered his former employer, Finvest Group, who fired him for insubordination when he tried to pitch them on decentralized ledgers. They stole his pitch deck, rebranded it, and sold it to a Hong Kong firm under another name. The same idea now powered a £400 million product, and no one knew it had been his. But what cut the deepest was his blood. His cousin, Cameron, once like a brother to him, had become an informant. Nathaniel had trusted him with sensitive project details in early development. Cameron had handed them over to regulators in exchange for immunity from a tax audit. Blood didn't just turn cold, it turned vicious. Now, Nathaniel stood in front of the Royal Courts of Justice, dressed not in vengeance, but in clarity. He had filed a lawsuit, not for money, for exposure. Cole versus Financial Conduct Authority. Cole v. Finvest Group. Cole v. Her Majesty's Treasury. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Is a self-made billionaire taking on the financial deep state? They laughed, called it performative, suicidal. But he wasn't doing it for attention. He was doing it to rip the curtain off a system that had tried to silence him. In court, Nathaniel revealed everything. Internal documents leaked from Finvest showing his original architecture for the defied ledger they'd stolen. Blockchain receipts proving his 2021 seed funds were legitimate, traceable, and falsely frozen. A whistleblower's affidavit from inside the FCA, confirming his file was marked as sensitive due to racial and socioeconomic risk factors. That last one landed like a bomb. A racial and socioeconomic risk factor. They didn't blacklist Nathaniel because of criminal activity. They did it because he was a black man from a council estate with too much digital power and no institutional oversight. The gallery gasped. Headlines exploded. Crypto visionary exposes UK financial discrimination. Anonymous billionaire takes aim at global banking cartel. Race, money, and the new class war in tech. But institutions don't fall quietly. 3 days later, Nathaniel's London home was raided. Not by the police, by auditors. Agents from HMRC and the FCA arrived with a warrant citing non-disclosure of digital assets and offshore trusts. He wasn't arrested, but they froze £92 million of his assets pending investigation. The headlines flipped overnight. Bitcoin billionaire under fire for tax evasion. Crypto mogul's empire in legal crosshairs. They couldn't discredit the facts, so they targeted his reputation. It was war. Worse yet, Pillar's infrastructure began suffering mysterious outages. DDoS attacks. Wallet bugs that didn't make sense. His coders traced the problem back to a third-party provider based in Luxembourg. Turns out, Finvest had secretly acquired the provider's parent company 2 months prior. They'd embedded kill switch code into the API dependencies. Booby-trapped lines Nathaniel's own team never saw. His empire was being undermined from within. But what they didn't know was that Nathaniel had been planning for this moment his entire life. He initiated a full-scale protocol migration. In 72 hours, Pillar went from a semi-centralized platform to a fully autonomous DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. Immutable, unstoppable, trustless. Even if they destroyed him, the system would survive. And then came the final blow. During the second court hearing, Nathaniel's legal team was ambushed by a sealed indictment, alleging his early crypto activity had violated anti-terrorism finance laws. It was a smear tactic. No evidence, but the timing was lethal. The judge froze the proceedings. ordered a comprehensive review of his holdings. The media erupted. Nathaniel Cole was now fighting for his life, not just in court, but in public consciousness. And that's when he vanished again. No one knows exactly how he escaped the net. The legal teams, the media, the digital chokeholds. But 12 days later, something strange happened. An anonymous user posted a cryptic message on Pillar's governance forum. When a system is rigged, justice isn't found in courtrooms. It's coded in fire. Attached is a digital manifesto, written in Nathaniel's unmistakable cadence. He outlined a new vision, not just for Pillar, but for a decentralized legal framework, a peer-to-peer arbitration protocol, smart contract courts, blockchain-based class actions against corrupt institutions. He called it Judgment Chain, and he wasn't building it for profit. He was building it to burn the old world down. By the next morning, news broke. 3 British MPs had been implicated in financial ties to Finvest Group. A leaked email revealed collusion between the FCA and several high-level bankers. And HMRC's records showed they received anonymous crypto donations from addresses linked to Finvest wallets. The house of cards was shaking. But Nathaniel? Still missing. And just when it seemed like the world couldn't get any more unstable, a 14-second video appeared on the dark web. Nathaniel, hooded, speaking directly to the camera. They tried to bury me. Again. But they don't understand the math. I am the protocol now. They thought this was about Bitcoin. This was never about Bitcoin. This is about power. And now it's ours. The screen glitched. Cut to black. Then a countdown appeared. Red. Digital. Ticking. 3 days. 11 hours. 49 minutes. To what? No one knows. But the system is watching. And waiting. The algorithmic trapdoor. It started with a name, not a message, not a document. Just a name scribbled in pencil on a folded receipt from a Soho cafe, left inside a book delivered anonymously to Nathaniel's last known address. The book was a sovereign individual. Dog-eared, annotated, torn spine. The name written on the receipt, Erasmus Blackwell. Nathaniel didn't know it yet, but this was the first breadcrumb in a trail that would lead to the biggest discovery of his life, a hidden backdoor into the global economic system, concealed in plain sight. And it all started with that one forgotten name. 72 hours before the countdown ends. The digital world buzzed with speculation. What was the countdown for? An expose? A cyber attack? Another decentralized product launch? Nathaniel's following had grown beyond crypto circles. Activists, rogue economists, whistleblowers, and people who had been systemically excluded were now tuning in. He hadn't posted again since the video. Inside an abandoned textile warehouse in East Berlin, equipped with Faraday cages and solar-powered crypto rigs, Nathaniel stared at a wall of paper, screens, and nodes. His eyes were bloodshot. His mind was frenzied. He wasn't sleeping. He was searching. Because the system had to have a flaw. Every system did. His team, just 4 anonymous coders working from different continents, were combing through regulatory white papers, smart contract exploit logs, tax haven disclosures, and UN banking memos. Somewhere there had to be a crack. And then, in a Discord archive from 2 years ago, buried under threads about cryptographic hashing, someone had posted a link to a long-forgotten PDF. Memo 11B, Quantitative Risk Calibration for Post-Basel 3 Tier 4 Derivatives. It was written in dry, impenetrable economic jargon, but Nathaniel had learned how to read between the lines. Buried within that document was a citation that didn't make sense. A research paper not published by any government agency, bank, or university. Just initials. R. Blackwell, 1998, Personal Archive, Monte Carlo Series. Nathaniel froze. Blackwell, the same name that was scribbled in the book. He ran the paper through every academic database. Nothing. It wasn't listed. It didn't exist, at least not officially. However, an obscure metadata tag in the document led him to an FTP server hosted in Liechtenstein. Password protected. Obsolete encryption. He reverse engineered the hash using a quantum-resistant preimage attack he'd been developing for Pillar. In 30 seconds, the server opened. What he found inside wasn't just a white paper. It was a bombshell. The loophole. Blackwell, as it turned out, was a ghost economist in the late 90s, once part of a shadow team hired by the IMF to test the theoretical limits of post-sovereign finance. He had created a simulation called Lazarus, designed to test what would happen if a completely stateless financial actor, a ghost fund, existed with no borders, tax identity, or accountability. Lazarus wasn't built to create money. It was built to vanish it, using shell structures, rotating smart contracts, yes, ahead of their time, and recursive offshore trusts. Blackwell had designed a system that could not be seized, traced, or frozen by any known legal method, because it existed in a regulatory gray zone. Every legal jurisdiction had an overlap. Every overlap had a contradiction, and every contradiction was a trapdoor. Blackwell's simulation showed how to chain these contradictions together to create a synthetic invisibility protocol for wealth, a digital black hole. The project was shut down in 2002. Blackwell was discredited. Some said he went mad. Others said he disappeared. But his notes remained, hidden in this FTP vault. And Nathaniel? He had just unlocked all of it. He spent the next 36 hours doing nothing else, tracing the theory, mapping the flows, and testing Lazarus in mock nodes. And then it happened. He ran a live trial on a closed pillar testnet. He spun up a ghost contract called AnkNode, sent 10,000 pounds of wrapped crypto assets into it, and watched as it split, rotated, and redistributed across 11 synthetic wallets, and disappeared from the Chain Explorer view entirely. To the untrained eye, it looked like a failed transaction, but in reality, the assets still existed, just detached from the economic fabric that would identify or tax them. He had done it. He had found the financial singularity, a wormhole in the blockchain. The twist. Excited beyond belief, Nathaniel prepared to re-enter the network. He planned to integrate AnkNode into the next Judgment Chain build, giving the global underclass a way to protect their assets from oppressive states and banks. But something wasn't right. When he checked the simulation logs, he noticed another transaction, not initiated by him, dated March 2003, over a decade before smart contracts even existed. It was the original Lazarus run. Blackwell had used it, not just theorized it. He deployed it, and the account it was linked to, a dead-end wallet that, to this day, still held 48,112 bitcoins, worth over 2.5 billion pounds. Unmoved, untouched, but still active. Blackwell hadn't disappeared. He had cashed out and gone underground. Nathaniel's mind raced. That much money left untouched for decades? It wasn't accidental. It was waiting. And then he saw it. In the metadata of the Lazarus node logs was a line of code disguised as a checksum. If underscore found underscore this, underscore your underscore yet. It was a message meant for someone who would one day find the trapdoor and understand it. Nathaniel wasn't just stepping into an opportunity. He was stepping into a legacy. But before he could share the discovery with his dev team, all of his screens went black. Every single one. Then, a single line of white text blinked onto the center monitor. We know what you found. Walk away. Then another line. Or you won't live long enough to deploy it. He stared, breath frozen in his chest. The lights in the warehouse flickered. Then a third message. The Lazarus engine is not yours to awaken. Then came the countdown. Again. Reset. 2 days. 0 hours. 00 minutes. But this time, the counter wasn't counting down. It was counting up. From 0, a reverse countdown. What had he triggered? And more importantly, who else was watching Lazarus all along? Day 1 of the reverse countdown. The warehouse in Berlin was still humming when the lights returned. Nathaniel stood motionless as the reverse countdown ticked forward, second by second, minute by minute. It was psychological warfare now. Whatever force was watching him didn't just want to erase him. They wanted to make him doubt himself. But Nathaniel Cole wasn't the man he used to be. He didn't flinch. He adapted. He immediately went offline. Solar power is severed from the city grid. Wi-Fi obliterated. Every node of his Lazarus research migrated to a portable drive, encrypted with 3 layers of quantum-secure keys, then sealed in a lead-lined pouch beneath the floorboards. By morning, Nathaniel was gone. The warehouse was wiped. Nothing but dust. Redemption begins in the shadows. He resurfaced not in London, not in Berlin, but in Lagos. To the average person, Lagos was a city of chaos. Horns blaring, generators humming, street vendors fighting for oxygen. But to Nathaniel, Lagos was energy. And more importantly, it was off the Western radar. It was here that he would begin to build his empire, not in the old corridors of power, but in the places they dismissed. Using Anknode, he launched Tunnel, a closed-loop peer-to-peer transaction system operating entirely on Lazarus principles. It started with a group of 20 street merchants who had been priced out of digital payments by Visa and MasterCard fees. They didn't need to know what Lazarus was. They just knew that now their transactions couldn't be frozen, taxed, or reversed. And it grew. In 6 months, Tunnel expanded to 1,200 users in Nigeria alone. Then Ghana. Then Kenya. Then a rogue node appeared in Brazil. Then one in Myanmar. All unconnected. All decentralized. All silent. Nathaniel never asked for permission. Ghosts don't need permission. The money flows backward. He didn't flaunt his new wealth. Not yet. That wasn't the point. He started reacquiring everything they had stolen from him. Quietly, the VC firm that mocked him, its Cayman shell company, was unknowingly purchased by a Hong Kong entity controlled by Tunnel. The flat he was evicted from in Tottenham, bought under the name of a Nigerian educational trust. The AI startup that plagiarizes code, acquired via merger with a silent Dubai firm that Tunnel bankrolled. Piece by piece, he was eating the system alive from the inside, but his power wasn't just in buying things back. It was in rewriting the rules. Nathaniel began releasing pieces of Lazarus theory publicly, but anonymously, posting them on Reddit, dark web message boards, and in obscure GitHub forks. It was disguised as fiction, fan theory, or experimental code. The financial elite didn't recognize it, but the disenfranchised did. Suddenly, indigenous protest groups in Chile were transferring funds anonymously. Feminist collectives in Iran were laundering donations through layered contracts. Refugees in Greece were storing their life savings in Anknode wallets tied to digital tattoos. Nathaniel didn't need to lead a revolution. He just had to give them the tools to start their own, the Lazarus paradox. But the more Nathaniel scaled, the more he noticed something strange. Lazarus was working too well. Wallets were disappearing from the chain and never reappearing. Funds were dissolving, not stolen, not lost, but somehow absorbed. When he finally tracked the anomaly to its root, it wasn't a bug. It was a failsafe. Buried in Blackwell's original code was an automated black vault, a logic gate that collected 0.003% of every Lazarus transaction and rerouted it into a cryptographic address that couldn't be cracked. At first, Nathaniel assumed it was theft, but the vault wasn't spending anything. It was accumulating. A pool of wealth, gathering passively over decades, is now worth £21.7 billion in real-time assets. No owner, no key, no withdrawal protocol. It was a digital monument to disappearance. Why would Blackwell create such a vault? A dead-end fund? A trapdoor that even Lazarus couldn't control? And then it hit him. It wasn't a vault. It was a vote. Every transaction, every micro slice of currency sent through Lazarus was casting a vote, a consensus algorithm, a governance mechanism for something much bigger. Blackwell hadn't just created a financial loophole. He had created a self-governing economic god, a system that would one day decide for itself how the wealth of the world should be redistributed. But to what end? A new invitation. A week later, while in Accra, Nathaniel received a package. No label, no return address. Inside was a steel car with a logo etched into the surface. The same symbols found in Blackwell's Lazarus logs. It wasn't a bank card. It was a key. When scanned through a secure reader, it revealed a single digital destination. A private server in Iceland, only accessible via a biometric challenge keyed to Nathaniel's retinal pattern. How did they get that? He didn't ask. He accessed the server. There, Waiting for him was a pre-recorded video. Blackwell, older, gaunt, somewhere between genius and myth. If you're watching this, it means Lazarus has awakened, and you passed the test I left for you. The wealth I funneled into the vault, it isn't yours, but the decision about what happens to it is. The system is watching. The world is bleeding. Now, the choice is yours. Do you dissolve it, or do you weaponize it? The screen glitched. Then came one final sentence. But be warned, Nathaniel, you're not the only one who found the key. The other ghost. Just as Nathaniel processed those words, his encrypted laptop flashed with an alert. Someone else had accessed the Lazarus vault. Not a withdrawal, not a hack, just a ping. A fingerprint authentication match. Another user had gained full access. Not a clone, not a fork, a true mirror key. Whoever it was had also passed the test. And the vault? It now showed a message in both of their digital dashboards. Joint consent is required for next phase deployment, which meant the next evolution of Lazarus couldn't happen without the other ghost. And Nathaniel had no idea who it was, or worse, what they planned to do. The private jet sliced through a vault of gray cloud, its carbon frame silent save for the murmur of recycled air. Nathaniel Cole sat alone, staring at the Lazarus dashboard on his retina-enabled interface, tethered to a biometric neural port in his temple. The vault had not moved. No funds withdrawn. No transactions authorized. But the other key holder had left a breadcrumb, an encrypted file uploaded to the shared consensus channel. He decrypted it. It was a digital signature, wrapped in a historical anomaly. A transaction hash from the early days of Bitcoin, January 2009. A Genesis block, and attached to it, a name, Devin Hart. Nathaniel's mouth went dry. Devin Hart was no ghost. He was the face of Western crypto legitimacy, the media darling, the billionaire who sold his blockchain startup to Alphabet for $22 billion, the one who sat on the IMF's digital currency board, and the one who'd once stolen Nathaniel's algorithm, rebranded it, and laughed when lawyers failed to prove it. Hart wasn't just the other Lazarus key holder. He was the man who'd buried Nathaniel once before. The first time Nathaniel had suspected Hart of stealing his work was a decade ago, back in Brixton. He was sleeping on a friend's couch, eating 1-pound ramen, and coding on borrowed Wi-Fi. He'd posted a rudimentary white paper on GitHub, an early prototype of a predictive smart contract. Within weeks, the repository had been mysteriously pulled, citing copyright conflict. 6 months later, Hart's company, Cypherpoint, unveiled a nearly identical concept at the MIT FinTech conference. Back then, no one listened. Who would believe a broke black coder from London over the polished, blue-eyed tech mogul from Stanford? But things were different now. Nathaniel had power, and more importantly, he had proof, because in the Lazarus Vault logs, every key interaction was traced, time-stamped, hashed, and irreversible. Hart had used a Lazarus key in 2015, 5 years before the world even knew Lazarus existed. That meant he had access to Blackwell's theory long before anyone else, which meant he hadn't stolen from Nathaniel. He had stolen from Blackwell. Nathaniel made a decision. He wouldn't confront Hart directly. He would force him into the light. From Lagos to London, Tunnel's decentralized media nodes launched an anonymous dossier, ***, the reckoning code, ***. Inside it, time-lock logs of Lazarus interactions traced to Devin Hart's IPs. Metadata tying Hart's crypto empire to shell companies founded days after Blackwell disappeared. Smart contract chains redirecting funds through charitable foundations that recycle money into political influence. But Nathaniel didn't publish it in newspapers or tech blogs. He posted it inside Judgment Chain itself, Lazarus sibling protocol, now used by over 7 million activists, journalists, and digital nomads. It appeared as an anonymous block update, verified by the chain consensus. Suddenly, the very system Hart had helped validate was being used to indict him. The reaction was nuclear. Crypto Twitter exploded. Reddit surged. Whistleblowers emerged. Nathaniel watched it all from a rooftop in Accra, sipping mint tea. Hart's board began a public inquiry. The IMF suspended him. Alphabet issued a statement claiming no prior knowledge, but Nathaniel wasn't done yet, because Hart was still a key holder, and the vault required consensus to unlock its next evolution. Nathaniel invited Hart to a private address in Zurich, neutral ground, but symbolic, the city where Blackwell had first conceived Lazarus. Hart arrived in a sleek black turtleneck, no entourage, no security, just two eyes filled with practiced charm and an undercurrent of fury. "Why not just take the vault, Nathaniel?" Hart asked. Nathaniel laughed. "You mean like you did?" Hart's smile vanished. "You're not the only one who was watching Blackwell," Hart said. "But you are the only one arrogant enough to think you can control what comes next." "I don't want control," Nathaniel said. "I want justice." Hart leaned in. "Then you better pray people still believe in it." Nathaniel placed a small chip on the table. It activated a holographic interface, showing the dual-key vault protocol. The next phase was labeled. Neither man knew what it was. Only Blackwell did. But the protocol had a fail-safe. If both keys were inserted, Gilgamesh would activate. If only one was inserted and the other refused for 90 days, the entire vault would self-destruct. Hart hesitated. Nathaniel spoke, quiet and cold. "This isn't negotiation. Either we open it or we burn it together." 3 weeks later, Nathaniel returned to London, not as a ghost, not as a fugitive, but as the man they had called crazy. He walked into the same investor conference that once laughed him off the stage. This time, he was a keynote speaker. He wore a black suit with digital lapel pin displaying real-time tunnel user growth. 18 million and climbing. "They told me I was too paranoid," he began. "Too poor, too black, too ambitious, too angry, too unscalable." A chuckle, then silence. But I wasn't too wrong. He unveiled Project Gilgamesh Live. He didn't explain what it did. He didn't have to. He simply said, "For the first time in modern history, the people who built the system won't be the ones who control it." And the crowd erupted. That night, back in his secure apartment, Nathaniel received a ping from the vault. The final consensus had been reached. Hart had submitted his key. Project Gilgamesh began its initialization sequence. A new message appeared. Protocol activation in 72 hours. Please prepare the network. Below it, a line of code scrolled across the screen, self-generating in real time. Nathaniel frowned, because the code wasn't written in Solidity or Python. It was in a language he'd never seen before. The screen flickered. 3 security layers decrypted. 7 multi-signature keys authenticated. A final biometric scan. Project Gilgamesh was now live. In a quiet subterranean vault built to withstand nuclear impact, Nathaniel Cole stood alone before a screen that now pulsed with new symbol. Not the Lazarus glyph. Something older. Something mythic. A crown atop a serpent devouring its tail. He leaned closer. The unknown programming language had resolved itself into a recursive logic tree, now running autonomously. Gilgamesh was not merely a protocol. It was a machine of redistribution, a decentralized AI designed to ingest financial data from every open-source node of Lazarus, Judgment Chain, and Tunnel, and recalculate the global wealth paradigm. Every transaction, every hoarded asset, every shadow bank, all fed into one algorithm with singular directive: level the playing field. The world didn't crash. It shifted. Tunnel wallets began to receive micro-deposits. 0.0001 BTC, 0.5 ETH, 3 ADA, fractions of wealth scraped from dormant corporate accounts, stale hedge funds, and anonymized stockpiles buried in cold wallets across the globe. No one knew where it came from. They only saw a message. This is not charity. This is balance. Economic advisors scrambled to explain it. Governments held emergency sessions. The media spun narratives of cyberterrorism. But Nathaniel didn't flinch. He stood atop One Canada Square, dressed in obsidian black linen, addressing a live global audience of 91 million via HoloStream. Behind him, digital projections showed charts of Tunnel's real-time impact. 47 million users in 24 hours, 6 million debt-free accounts. 1.2 million homes receiving rent credits. And at the center, Nathaniel Cole's public Lazarus ID. The man they once mocked as crazy. Now the most trusted digital entity on Earth. He spoke with gravity. This isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. You call me crazy because I refuse to believe poverty was normal. Because I refuse to accept that only a few should decide the fate of billions. A pause. I didn't bet on Bitcoin. I bet on truth. It wasn't just about decentralizing currency. It was about dismantling control. Lazarus, Gilgamesh, and Judgment Chain combined created a new trinity: money, memory, and morality. Corporations that once thrived in secrecy now had every transaction mapped to social impact. Politicians found their campaign funds rerouted and less tied to verified public benefit. Lobbyists were disarmed. Billionaire hoarders found their offshore vaults automatically rediverted to infrastructure projects. In Lagos, children drank clean water funded by Swiss accounts that once bought yachts. In Manila, teachers received back pay from cold wallets that once backed warlord arms trades. And all of it was automatic. There were no demands, no assassinations, no riots, only code. Nathaniel never bought a mansion. He lived in a rotating node of safe houses, data centers, and repurposed community shelters. But his influence? Unmistakable. The World Economic Forum attempted to ban Lazarus-derived systems. They failed. The UN invited him to speak. He declined. Instead, he built the Council of Ghosts, a rotating digital DAO composed of formerly voiceless thinkers, activists, whistleblowers, and technologists from every oppressed region in the world. Each had a vote. Each had access. This council steered the evolution of Gilgamesh, because Nathaniel knew no man should hold this much power alone. Devin Hart returned, groveling. He claimed repentance. He offered resources, atonement. Nathaniel listened, then uploaded Hart's apology to the blockchain for the world to see. You don't get privacy when your crimes were public. Hart's empire collapsed. But Nathaniel didn't gloat. He simply returned to work. Months later, a final Lazarus node activated. Its location? A desert outpost in Namibia. The node transmitted a single file. A video. Blackwell. Alive. You did it, he said. You found the resurrection protocol. You prove that belief is more powerful than approval. Nathaniel closed the file. No broadcast. No announcement. He simply whispered. Now it begins. The journey of Nathaniel Cole is not just a tale of wealth. It is a sermon of resilience. A blueprint for economic insurgency. A gospel of data-driven justice. He wasn't a king. He was a key. The world he unlocked was already within us. We only needed the courage to believe the system could be rewritten. So to you, the viewer, the listener, the doubter, the dreamer, learn. Move in silence. Think differently. Bet on yourself. Because one day they may call you crazy. But one day they may call you right. Like, comment, subscribe. The future doesn't belong to those who wait. It belongs to those who build.